Hello. Welcome back to my channel. It has been a while since I did a video, but I have a backlog of ideas that I am ready to share. And I wanted to start with a really exciting announcement, which is a pregnancy announcement. So my husband and I are pregnant with our third child. At the making of this video and the filming, I am 14 weeks pregnant. That won't be true as when this video comes out, I'll be a little further along. But 14 weeks right now, and I am so excited, ecstatic to say that I have had 0 days of nausea or morning sickness or feeling terrible, which is not how my first two pregnancies went. My first two pregnancies, my first one, I did have some morning sickness like between weeks 7 to 10. And my second pregnancy was a lot worse. It started a lot earlier, it lasted a lot longer, and the nausea was more intense there. So again, this is my third pregnancy now, and to say that this has been easier than my first two, because now I'm older, I'm in my 30s now, and I was in my 20s earlier, it is just so exciting to have no nausea and to not feel bad. Really, I just was a little bit more fatigued and needed a few naps during the first trimester, but right now I don't even feel pregnant besides my belly growing. So I wanted to share some things that I have done differently in this pregnancy to achieve those results that may help you as well. So I want to kind of back up and again share what I was doing in my first pregnancy, because I really think that this was causing a lot of problems. So in those first two pregnancies, I was taking beef liver capsules because that was like the cool trendy thing to do. And while I was certified as a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner and could run my own labs, I wasn't running micronutrient panels at that time, or looking at certain micronutrients that are really important to understand and look at during pregnancy. So during that time, I was just kind of taking a general multivitamin, prenatal vitamin, and then I was taking beef liver on top of that. And so what I've come to realize and understand now is that beef liver has a lot of copper in it and not a lot of zinc. And so what happens to a woman during pregnancy is that her copper is naturally going to rise, just as a natural process of the body, because copper is necessary to develop the blood vessels in the baby. So pre-pregnancy, it should be around 100 in blood work. And so that's going to naturally rise a little bit in the first trimester. It's going to rise even more in the second trimester and even more in the third trimester. So naturally it increases because it also has a lot to do with estrogen. So copper helps estrogen rise. Estrogen helps to retain copper in the body. So there is this correlation of the hormones rising and the copper naturally rising. But the other part of it is that zinc does not naturally rise in a pregnant woman. And so essentially I was just self-poisoning myself with the beef liver because I was adding more copper into my already rising copper levels. And one of the main symptoms of copper toxicity or having too much copper in the body is nausea, even without being pregnant. So even after my pregnancies, like before I really realized and started doing the deeper lab testing on this, I was nauseous every morning. Again, not even being pregnant, I was nauseous because of the copper toxicity issues. And those copper toxicity issues, they can cause histamine problems. They can cause postpartum depression and anxiety, which I had terribly. It got worse with my second pregnancy, but I've had that since I was a teenager, since I had started puberty, which again is another sign. If you notice depression or anxiety has started for you in puberty or in a teen, that you know it is really important to look at the copper and zinc and ceruloplasmin levels to make sure that is not a factor, because we want to blame it on the hormones, but there are micronutrient factors that affect our hormones. And those are really kind of more of the root cause level to those hormonal problems. So just something to look at. So when we see that it's starting in puberty and we're seeing that get worse with pregnancy, again, that's triggering in my mind now that there is some kind of copper problem. So again, I was taking the beef liver and I was taking a prenatal that had a small amount of copper in it and eating foods that were high in copper, like cashews, nuts, seeds, leafy greens, mushrooms, chocolate. I was having a chocolate protein shake every day with some added cacao nibs on top and bee pollen. All of those are really high in copper, which you can get plenty of copper if you are eating whole foods. So a multivitamin or a prenatal with copper added into it is usually not necessary. So I've been taking now a prenatal. I finally found one that does not have copper and it has a good amount of zinc in it. And I'm going to share that with you here in a second. But that I think is one of the most pivotal things that I did was to first test and understand what my copper and zinc levels are, as well as ceruloplasmin, because that is the transport protein for copper. It's essentially like a little school bus that copper has to get onto to travel to go to the place to do its job. And if you don't have enough ceruloplasmin, which is created in the liver, your adrenals have a lot to do with that as well. So if you don't have enough ceruloplasmin, you're just going to have copper in the bloodstream trying to get somewhere and it doesn't know where to go because it doesn't have its school bus to take it there. So that's how it gets deposited into the liver. It gets deposited into the brain, which is why high copper can cause depression and anxiety and other mental health imbalances. So once I had done my labs and I understand those levels and I started to detox from that copper toxicity that I had since I was young and had made worse with the beef liver supplementation. So I had gotten that under control with the right amount of zinc for my body. And I have continued to take that extra amount of zinc on top of the prenatal. So I think that is one of the most pivotal and the biggest thing that I did to bypass pregnancy nausea and morning sickness was to dial in my micronutrients, which is something that I work with pregnant women all the time in preconception and pregnancy and postpartum to balance those micronutrients because it is one of the most important things that you can do. So the prenatal that I've been using is actually developed by a friend, Dr. Natalie. It's called Female Formulations, her comprehensive prenatal multivitamin. So this is actually a copper and iron-free prenatal vitamin, which is really important because again, that copper is rising. Most pregnant women don't need extra copper. And if you do, I want you to prove that to me with your lab work instead of just saying the internet told you so because of the symptoms you're experiencing. That is not a good way to make supplement choices. So it's also iron free because if you do need iron, again, I want you to prove that with your labs, pregnancy labs, which are different lab ranges than when you're not pregnant. So iron would need to be taken away from a general multivitamin. So you do not want to be taking a prenatal that has iron built into it, just FYI. So this also has some higher levels of methylfolate and choline, which again are both really important for baby development and pregnancy in general. So it also has a good amount of zinc. It's got 25 milligrams of zinc. So for somebody who has copper toxicity issues, that is a general good amount of zinc that is necessary. And again, that might need to increase trimester by trimester as copper continues to rise. So again, just getting the proper labs to understand what your levels are is really important for the changes that happen during pregnancy. So for me, 25 milligrams is not enough because I've run my labs. I know what is working to control the past history of depression and anxiety. So I personally take another 25 milligrams with some added B6 at nighttime. So that has to do with some other issues that I had regarding pyrroles and pyroluria testing. So if you haven't heard of that, it is just kind of a byproduct of heme synthesis in the body, and elevated levels of pyrroles can be genetic or it can be from chronic stress. And when somebody has elevated levels of pyrroles, those pyrroles attach and link on to zinc and B6 inside the body, and they essentially just flush them out in your urine. So it's really common to need more zinc and B6 in somebody who has elevated pyrroles. So that is something that was very specific to me, and taking 50 milligrams of zinc is something that I know works for my body and is something that I am tracking over time, because you want a balance between the copper and the zinc. You don't want too much copper and you don't want too much zinc. You want to maintain that balance there. So while I know that my body for the past couple years has actually been detoxing excess copper that's been stored in my liver and in my brain for decades of time, I need those higher levels amount of zinc to balance that out, which isn't going to be forever. So again, knowing what your lab work looks like is really important here. So Dr. Natalie has told me, when I told her, I was like, I'm taking your prenatal and I don't have any pregnancy nausea or morning sickness. She's like, that is one of the top 3 things that I hear regarding this supplement. And I've seen that with my clients, pregnant clients that I have recommended this to, who have nausea. They start taking the multivitamin and they write me and they say, all my nausea is gone. What the heck? This is so amazing. And they feel so much better. So that is something that's really common that I would recommend. This is the only prenatal vitamin that I would recommend. Sometimes I do custom formulations for clients, and sometimes, depending on different genetic situations, methylfolate and methylated B12 won't work for you. It can actually cause more anxiety in certain individuals. So that's just something to be aware of, because most people are recommending the methylated vitamins to everyone, but that's really only if you have the MTHFR SNPs. There are other SNPs like COMT, where you would do better on other forms of B12 and folate. So again, it can be definitely individual to you, but for the most part, I have found that myself and a lot of clients are doing really well on this one. So step 2 in how to prevent pregnancy nausea and morning sickness. Something that I did in preconception. So before we got pregnant, I was using the Cellcore products for drainage support. So that looks like using their liver and kidney support. I was using their mineral support. I was using their lymphatic support. I was using their drainage activator. I was using their bowel mover supplements. So those all help the drainage system to flush toxins from your body and support the liver and the gallbladder flow, the bile flow. So again, this kind of goes with the copper toxicity. If you have too much copper or heavy metals or environmental toxins, that can kind of make the bile in the body more sludgy. And the more sludgy your bile gets, the more it's going to back up and not be able to flow out those toxins, which can cause nausea and morning sickness. So whenever somebody says, hey, I have nausea, even outside of pregnancy, the first thing I think of is the liver. So the liver is responsible for processing a lot of those toxins and hormones. So again, if your hormones are rising in pregnancy, your liver has to process those. And if it doesn't have the adequate micronutrients, and if it doesn't have all of the energy and the ability to do its job, then like creating bile, then it's going to start to back up the entire drainage system. So bile is specifically designed for picking up those toxins and moving them through into the digestive system so you can poop them out. If you are constipated or if you are not moving those toxins out, they're just going to stick around. They're going to be recirculated in the body. And then again, your liver has to go do those same processes again for those same heavy metals or hormones or toxins. And over time, it's going to get worn out because it's not designed to recirculate toxins and do that whole process again. So I was very specific in helping and supporting my bile and my liver and my lymphatic system, all of those systems that are going to drain toxins and chemicals from the body. I did that for 4 months. And that is something that I think is a great tool, no matter who you are, as long as you don't have any sensitivities to the different herbs and stuff inside the product. Those are generally safe for most people outside of pregnancy. You don't want to do that while you're in pregnancy, but as a preconception support. So that is something else that I was doing that I think really helped me to have a great first trimester. So the last thing that has come to mind is taking a progesterone support during the first trimester. So that is something that I worked with my OBGYN on to get a custom compounded progesterone support for that first trimester. So having, again, if we think about the balance between copper and zinc, there's also a balance between estrogen and progesterone that needs to be synergistic in the body, because too much estrogen can cause a lot of problems. Again, the liver and the bile are going to have to carry that excess estrogen out of the body. So having enough progesterone can leave a person without the nausea and the morning sickness, without those high estrogen symptoms. So that's where I went to my doctor. I said, hey, I would like to be on a lower dose of progesterone to support my body and the baby and my hormones, because I have a history looking at my Dutch test and my blood work of low progesterone. So that is something that I just wanted to do preventatively and proactively to support myself. And I think balancing that estrogen to progesterone ratio also did a lot for managing any type of morning sickness that would have come my way. So if that is something that you want to explore, again, you want to have some lab work done. You want to know that you actually have low progesterone before you just go buy and take progesterone. So again, work with your OBGYN, or you can get access to those on my website. But working with your OBGYN, they are going to recommend, I think it's called Prometrium, which is the pharmaceutical progesterone option. That is a common prescription. That is not something that you would want to take because it is full of GMO peanut oil. It is full of different chemical fillers, and it has red dye number 40 and a yellow dye inside of it, which just doesn't make any sense to me. But that's what they do. That's what the pharmacy companies do. So while it may help, it's a synthetic form and it has a bunch of chemical additives that aren't healthy for you. So all you got to do is just ask your doctor and say, hey, I would actually like a custom compounded one with just progesterone in it. And my doctor out here, she literally said, I've never done that before, but I will look around for you. It's something that I've done with other doctors in the past. So that's how I knew about it. So she just found a compounding pharmacy that was a couple hours from us, and they made the progesterone. So for me, it was 100 milligrams specifically, and the only thing in it is progesterone. You can get it in a capsule, you can get it in a suppository. I would recommend the capsule because I have found that the suppositories can cause a lot of what I would say are like electric shocks. That's what I've experienced using it, are these shocks, like cramp-like shocks that happen, which I just don't feel good about. So it's different when you're taking it as a capsule. You are not going to absorb as much versus a suppository, but that might be a good thing because, again, too much is too much. So that could be a side effect of using the suppository. So I just had them custom compound it. They shipped it overnight to my house. It was really, really simple. It's definitely more expensive than the pharmaceutical option, but health benefits wise, I would much rather prefer to not have the food dyes and the additives and just have straight progesterone. So that is something that I think is also a really big game changer. Again, you want to run your labs just to make sure that you actually need it and that it will be supportive to you. But progesterone is also pretty mild in terms of like toxicity or side effects. It's relatively safe, even at higher dosages, but definitely check with your doctor. So again, this is not medical advice by any means. This is me just sharing what I have done and what I have learned over the decades worth of time running hormones and studying hormones and working with clients in this space. and what has really helped me to have a very thriving pregnancy up until this point, which I am so grateful and blessed to say. So I hope that helps. I will link all of the products and information down in the description. And congratulations on your pregnancy or your future pregnancy if you are watching this video. And I can't wait for you to share, if you can, in the comments if you have tried the prenatal and what your experience with it is. I will talk to you soon with more pregnancy information. Bye.